Today is a day to be celebrated. Well, not quite today, but like 2 weeks ago it was. Why, you might ask? Well, there's been a new sexuality added to the LGBTQIAAP community. That's right, even more letters to come. But the problem with this particular sexuality is that it was created by a straight guy. Okay, it's not actually that simple, even though it kind of is. Just promise me you'll stick around for the whole video before you decide if you hate me, because I did a ton of research and I want to try and tackle this from both sides. Speaking of both sides, I fully expect to get hate from all around, because that's kind of just how the internet works when you talk about any controversial subjects, even if you do try to remain objective. So how about we play a game? You drop a like on this video right now, and if I don't completely piss you off by the end of it, I get to keep it. If I do piss you off, feel free to take it back or even replace it with a dislike. We've got a very open refund policy here at the Hainstein channel. Alright, with the shameless plug out of the way, let's dive into this. So if you've been on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok lately, maybe it's made its way to Facebook too, I don't know, no one uses Facebook anymore. Anyway, if you've been on any social media platform as of late, you've probably heard of this already. It's called the super straight movement, and it's surprisingly less stupid than it sounds. It all started when a TikTok user by the name of Kyle Royce uploaded this video.
Yo guys, I made a new sexuality now, actually. It's called super straight, okay? Since straight people, or straight men as myself, I get called transphobic because I wouldn't date a trans woman. You know, they're like, would you date a trans woman? I'm like, no, why? That's a female. No, like, that's not a real woman to me. Like, I want a real woman. No, you're just transphobic. So now, I'm super straight. I only date the opposite gender, women, that are born women. So you can't say I'm transphobic now because that's just my sexuality, you know?
Now, most level-headed individuals can look at this and recognize that he's just taking the piss. This was never meant to be the beginning of a movement. But what's the one thing you shouldn't do if you want something to go away? That's right, pay it any kind of attention, which is exactly what happened. The LGBT community got pissed. Like, really pissed. So pissed that this TikTok blew up to garner millions of views. And what happens when one person gets pissed off about something? Other people get pissed off at them being pissed off until everyone's pissed off, and it's all a whole lot bigger than it ever should have been. Once this video started gaining traction, others who felt the same sentiment started making videos of their own claiming to be coming out as super straight, which basically meant it was all over. It reached the point of becoming a meme. Whether people's intentions were serious or not, it's a meme now, which means it's going to be spread everywhere. So I guess let's break this down a bit. First, for the people watching who may be unfamiliar with these terms. Cisgender is the term referring to somebody who identifies by their birth sex. So like, I was born a boy and I still identify as a boy. Transgender is the term for somebody whose identity doesn't match up with their birth sex. This could be someone born one sex that identifies as another, someone who's gone through hormone therapy to transition sexes, or someone who doesn't necessarily identify with any gender at all. And I understand that it can be confusing for some people to discuss, so I'll make sure to clarify this right away. When I say trans woman, I'm referring to somebody who's transitioned into being a woman, which obviously means if I say trans man, I'm referring to somebody who's transitioned into being a man. Non-binary is the term to describe someone who doesn't identify as one sex or the other, or someone who identifies differently based on how they feel day to day. And finally, gender is referring to how somebody identifies themselves, such as male, female, or non-binary, whereas sexuality is referring to how we perceive sexual attraction to those around us, such as identifying as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, or one of the many others. Okay, sorry to anyone who already knew all of that, but I want this to be a resource that anyone can understand, so I want to make sure it's clear. So super straight began on the idea that trans women are real women and trans men are real men. Therefore, if you're a straight male, you must be willing to date a transgender woman just as you would a cisgender woman, otherwise you're transphobic. Now there are a lot of straight individuals, male and female, that don't feel any attraction to transgender people. This obviously created a problem in that these people don't consider themselves to be transphobic, but as a straight person are being told they have to be attracted to transgender people. And this is where the TikTok came in, because Kyle Royce, in dealing with this predicament himself, found a solution. If his sense of attraction doesn't line up with the definition for being straight, then he must not be straight. He needs to find a different title to explain his sexuality. And all this logic checks out. If you don't feel like your sexuality fits within the bounds of what's there, you need to find a new one to describe yourself. So he decided to coin the term super straight, which is where everything went wrong. His reasoning for doing so was based in the same logic that the LGBT community has used when creating sexuality such as demisexual, skoliosexual, spectrosexual, and even more. But you'll notice there's a stark contrast in naming schemes used here. Now, I obviously understand that this guy never intended to start a movement, he just wanted to prove a point using the LGBT community's logic. But his grand failure was in using the word super to precede the word straight. Super inherently implies being better or superior to those who aren't, which obviously is not the point when creating a sexuality. I honestly believe if he coined a term such as cis straight or true straight, a lot of the problems that have arisen would have been mitigated. I know those names suck, they're just examples. Anyway, the problems I'm referring to kind of kicked off in the same way this whole thing originated. Trans women are real women. Therefore, by excluding them from your dating pool, you're being transphobic. A label doesn't change that. Which is where things start to get muddy. You might expect that this fight is just straight people versus the LGBT communities, but it's not. There's actually a strong mixing of armies here. Straight people who agree with the LGBT community, as well as LGBT community members that agree with the logic of the super straights. As the argument cascaded into something much bigger, it's also expanded to include terms such as super gay, super lesbian, and super bisexual. This simply means that you are gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but only attracted to people who were born that specific gender, so boys that were born boys and girls that were born girls. Which obviously, the term still sucks, but it shows that there's a larger need for this idea than just straight people being dicks. Now, this is probably the part that you say that none of this changes the fact that excluding trans women from your dating pool of women implies that they're not women and is therefore transphobic, which would probably be a hard thing to argue against if the LGBT community hadn't already drawn their own line in the sand. You may recall me mentioning skoliosexual earlier in the video. No, this is not the sexuality of being attracted to people with back problems. Skoliosexual is defined as a sexual orientation that describes those who are sexually attracted to people with non-cisgender identities, such as people who are non-binary, genderqueer, or trans. So let's think about that for a second. This sexuality was created explicitly for attraction to non-cisgender identities, which means they're excluding cisgender people. By the LGBT community's own logic, this would make anyone who's a skoliosexual also cisphobic. So by selectively grouping transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people separately from cisgender people, they've admitted that there is a difference. I'm sure that people who identify as skoliosexual don't hate or hold any ill will towards cisgender people. They just have a sexual attraction to non-gender conforming individuals. It really doesn't matter what the difference comes down to, which is a big part of the argument a lot of people are getting hung up on. If the LGBT community has already separated the idea of a non-gender conforming identity from a cisgender one, then why is it not okay for someone to create a sexuality that mirrors it in the opposite way? Aside from the tremendously stupid name. An argument that keeps getting brought up over and over is the hypothetical situation of hooking up with a transgender person who has transitioned fully. So this is someone who's gone through hormone therapy, they've gotten a sex change, all the parts are in the right place, you know what I mean? In this scenario, let's say you hit it off with this person at a bar. You're having a great night, and at this point, you're basically in the end zone, ready to go home and do the nasty. Then, wanting to be honest and straightforward with you, they inform you that they used to be the opposite sex, but they've had a sex change and hormone therapy, so they have all the right parts and even look indistinguishable. Those who are against the idea of super straight claim that in this situation, you're transphobic if you suddenly lose your attraction to that person, which to be honest is kinda rapey. The idea that you can't change your mind about someone flies directly in the face of consent. As I think most people would agree, you're perfectly valid and within your right to change your mind about something when new information is presented. Let's try changing the scenario to relate more to the common person. Vegetarians, I'm sorry. Let's say you have a burger joint that you love that only serves non-GMO, grass-fed, humanely harvested meat. You think this burger is gorgeous and you've had a really good time at this burger joint. But then you find out that the meat was actually made using GMOs. You don't have a problem with GMOs. You understand that most people don't care, and in a lot of cases they can be useful. But regardless of this, you suddenly don't feel the same attraction to that burger. You don't have a problem with it. You're just no longer attracted to it. It no longer checks the boxes that you require for attraction. You see what I mean? When new information is presented, it's perfectly valid to lose your attraction, so I heavily disagree with this argument. Another thing that keeps getting repeated is that the super straights don't need the label. And I believe that to be completely untrue. Say I'm trying to set up a friend of mine and they tell me that they're straight. Using the definitions that we're currently working with, I assume that a trans person is within those bounds. Upon meeting, it turns out I was wrong. They actually don't feel any attraction to this person. And it's not like they're horrendously ugly or evil or anything. This is someone I'm vouching for, remember? It's just a personal preference that they have. So in this same scenario, if we have a specific label for cisgender attraction, which at the moment unfortunately is super straight, I can get the specific information that I need quickly and effectively. Honestly, I can go even further in explaining the necessity of this title because there's actually a category missing still. What about someone who finds attraction to cisgender people and post-operation transgender people, but doesn't find attraction to somebody who is physically still their birth sex, but identifies as another? That's a perfectly valid scenario because someone who is medically transitioned can become visually and physically indistinguishable from someone born that sex. But the same can't be said for somebody who hasn't gone through hormone therapy or a sex change but still identifies as a particular gender. You see how quickly this can all get confusing? A lot of people are misunderstanding the argument and saying no one is forcing you to date a trans person. Which to that I say, the argument isn't about being forced to date a trans person. In the end, everyone's going to make their own decisions about who they want to date. The issue arises when someone starts shouting transphobe if somebody decides that they don't find attraction to transgender people. Why should they not be allowed to express themselves without judgment? Bringing it back to the skoliosexual example from earlier, does that make them a cisphobe? Does being gay make you a womanphobe? If this is how it works, then I guess identifying as pansexual is the only way to be no one phobic. It's also been said that yes, you can have a genital preference, but you can't differentiate a trans person from someone born that gender. Why does genital preference have to stop at penis or vagina? Some people only like them long, or of a certain ethnicity, or shaved a certain way. So why can't we get into more specifics? Some people can't handle banana-flavored foods or candy. They just like naturally grown bananas. This entire scenario has been a really confusing ride because the LGBT community is supposed to be accepting and loving, but that's not how they're acting in this situation. The creator of the original TikTok is getting death threats, and his mother's business is now in jeopardy because of being fake review bombed. Some people have even tried to link this whole thing to neo-Nazism, which for a refresher is the post-World War II militant social and political movement seeking to revive Nazi ideology. They claim that super straight is a reference to the SS, basically the worst of the worst Nazis. Part of Nazi ideology is creating a world consisting of just the Aryan race, white-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. I don't know if you've noticed, but this guy's not even white. Anyway, this whole thing boils down to this. By saying that to be straight you must be attracted to trans people, you've given the key to them to create their own sexuality, because by your own definition, they don't conform to the sexuality of straight. This isn't about transphobia. I know a lot of legitimately transphobic people have adopted this term because they know it's making the LGBT communities mad. But this is about labels and making everybody feel comfortable on the highly convoluted playing field that's been created. I honestly think that if we came up with a less demeaning term than super straight, this could actually be a bridge to getting those that misunderstand the LGBT community more on board with its ideals. The same move of finding a better name will also weed out the legitimate transphobes. If we start referring to it as cis straight or something more scientific, the people who need this label will adopt it. But the people who are just being transphobic will resent the terminology of the LGBT and just expose themselves as big. It's obviously not the only thing wrong with what's going on, but as stupid as the term super straight is, I honestly believe that renaming it could be the key to more understanding and acceptance of the LGBT movement. Anyway, that's about it for this week, so thank you if you made it this far. Did you take your like back, or did I get to keep it? Tell me what you think about this in the comments, because I actually do want to hear all sides of this discussion, and I will be present there myself. Hit the subscribe button down below, and make sure to check out some of my other less controversial content while you're here, and I'll see you all next week. Stay sexy, you heinous motherfucker.